It is not the challenge of dollars. It is the challenge of ideals and ideas.
The golden age of Hollywood from the 1920s to the 1960s came about because of the idea of sound in film and motivated one of the greatest Hollywood studios today, Warner Brothers, to revolutionize film. As a result of their popularity and success, their idea became the turning point in film history, caused an economic boom for Hollywood, and helped people through the Great Depression and World War II. The popularity of the idea inspired the evolution of sound in film for years to come. The idea of sound in film existed long before it became prominent. Many filmmakers and movie companies thought sound wasn't necessary. It was expensive, and they couldn't envision movies with talking actors. Even the great inventor Thomas Edison said, "The talking motion picture will not supplant the regular silent motion picture." Regardless, Edison created the kinetoscope and combined it with his phonograph and called it the kinetophone in 1895. After the kinetophone was presented, Edison was well praised for his great invention. Numerous inventors all over the world, especially in France, India, and Japan, raced to create this great invention with the best quality, so that filmmakers could acknowledge the development of sound in film. As improvement continued in 1921, scientists employed by Western Electric announced a new synchronized process called Vitaphone, by which sound could be mechanically reproduced onto a disc and then synchronized with film images. The inventors shopped their invention to the major studios in hopes that they might purchase patents, but much to the inventors' dismay, the studios were not interested. During World War I, Harry, Sam, Albert, and Jack Warner founded what they called Warner Brothers Studio. Sam Warner was inspired by the idea of phonofilm and begged his brothers to buy Western Electric's sound-on-disc system.
What he saw was that Warner Brothers was going to disappear unless they took a big gamble on sound. Now, it was a tough sell to his other brothers. They really weren't as gung-ho about sound as he was. Most of Hollywood was just very happy to keep silent films going forever because they were cheap to produce. You could translate them easily into any foreign language just by changing the dialogue cards. You didn't have to worry about a system in the theaters for producing sound, so you didn't have to worry about speakers and that kind of thing. You could just get a guy playing a piano and that was your soundtrack.
My brother phoned me that there's an apparatus I should see. And after seeing it, I then made up my mind that through this instrument, talking pictures would be possible.
Although this idea was a major turning point for the studio, this decision was risky, and it cost the studio $7 million for the Vitaphone patents. The Warner Brothers' first production with the Vitaphone was a feature-length film called Don Juan in 1926, starring John Barrymore. The film had a soundtrack of swords clashing, doors opening, glass shattering, and orchestra music.
It was a big, huge success, at least initially, the premiere. But the problem was there weren't a lot of places you could actually present the movie because most theaters weren't wired for sound. It ended up losing big time. As a matter of fact, it almost bankrupted the company.
Even in oppressive times, Sam Warner did not despair about the possibility of sound in films. He produced The Jazz Singer, starring Al Jolson, that premiered on October 6, 1927. The film had barely 2 minutes of synchronized dialogue. Unfortunately, the day before the premiere of The Jazz Singer, Sam Warner died of a cerebral hemorrhage. It put the other brothers in a serious emotional state. They were also told that The Jazz Singer would never be successful and that they didn't have enough sound in their film. To their surprise, Mordaunt Hall, who was a movie critic for the New York Times, praised Warner Brothers for astutely realizing that a film conception of The Jazz Singer was one of the few subjects that would lend itself to the use of the Vitaphone. The film had other effects that were more immediate. George Jessel, an actor who was in his third season touring with the stage production of The Jazz Singer, said, "A week or two after the Washington engagement, the sound and picture version of The Jazz Singer with Al Jolson was sweeping the country, and I was swept out of business. I couldn't compete with a picture theater across the street. showing the first great sound picture in the world for 50 cents, while the price at my theater was $3. Walt Disney, the founder of Disney Studios, said that the moment he saw the jazz singer, he just had to have sound, and he created the famous Steamboat Willie animation that debuted in 1928. It was the first film to completely create a soundtrack in post-production, including sound effects, music, and dialogue. In March 1928, Warner Brothers announced that The Jazz Singer was playing at 235 theaters, though many showed it only silently, with ticket prices at 50 cents. On September 27th, The Jazz Singer became the first feature-length talking picture to be shown in Europe when it premiered at London's Piccadilly Theatre. The movie created a sensation, according to British film historian Rachel Lowe. The film was easily the biggest earner for Warner Brothers to that point, and would remain so until it was surpassed a year later by The Singing Fool, another Jolson feature, making a profit of $1.2 million, with 5 million people viewing the screenings. Warner Brothers were given the title of the ones who started the sound era, one of the biggest turning points in film history. However, that didn't last long. When the Depression began with the collapse of U.S. stock market on October 29, 1929, known as Black Tuesday, not very many people wanted to buy movie tickets. To finance the purchase of movie theaters and the conversion to sound, the Hollywood studios had tripled their debts during the mid and late 20s to $410 million. To survive, the industry trimmed salaries and production costs and closed the doors of a third of the nation's theaters. To boost attendance, theaters lowered admission prices to as little as 25 cents. Things were plummeting to the ground for all of the Hollywood studios, but their enjoyable musical productions soon enough paid off. Film critics and historians believe that the films Warner Brothers and the rest of Hollywood produced created an escape for the people of America in these desperate times. Warner Brothers' 42nd Street musical became a huge hit, but also resulted in another net loss of $7 million due to the cost to put the sound film in theaters. Although Warner Brothers and Hollywood in general struggled with money during the Great Depression, they also believed that they thrived throughout the period, thanks to their musicals and their new comedic cartoons in color. With the onset of World War II, sound-enhanced newsreels told audiences about world events and were played before the feature film. Prior to the advent of the newsreel, Americans primarily depended on radio and print media for news and information. In times of war in the United States, the newsreels became very important. News of World War II could reach theaters all over the country faster than ever before. The Hollywood newsreels weren't the only productions that were beneficial to the people in society, but also war films that Warner Brothers and the other studios were producing. Warner Brothers' Yankee Doodle Do or Die musical became a favorite and a must-see for the amusement it brought to the audience. Now that the idea of sound in film was becoming largely popular throughout the world, all filmmakers and inventors tried to perfect it. In 1940, Walt Disney's Fantasia was the first film to be released in 2-channel stereo, in a format he called Fanasound. This opened the door to decades of sound and film development, bringing us to the 8 channels of digital sound that we enjoy in theaters today. Sound technology brought in an immense turning point. It helped effect many significant changes for society. Now that there was sound available in the theaters and eventually to take home, it made it accessible to the visually impaired. Talking pictures introduced a whole new audience to the motion picture. Sound wasn't only bringing Warner Brothers Studios and the rest of Hollywood success, but also giving excitement, amusement, news, and an escape to audiences who were struggling with the hard times of World War I, the Great Depression, and World War II. Since the Warner Brothers took the idea of sound to the next level, their work and effort on sound and film became a major turning point in film history, changing movies forever.